All right. Oop, I'm going to move this out of the way. Good morning, Alyssa. Give people a little more time, as is tradition. Looks like we have, according to my little viewer number, we have 3 people. Momgineering the Future is back. Thank you very much for joining us. Katarina is here. Good morning. All right. Well, I think I'm going to get started. So, welcome everybody to Curiosity Corner Live. My name is Andy. Bow ties are cool. And every day at 10:30, we're going to bring you live science content every weekday, Monday through Friday at 10:30. So make sure you check back. And if you haven't subscribed already and you've been here a while, make sure you subscribe and hit that like button. That'll help us a lot. Hello, Isaac. Welcome. Today we're going to talk about oxidation, and I'll explain what oxidation is and some examples of it, where you can find it, where you can't find it. And with that, let's get started here. So, first things first, I'm going to do a little experiment right off the bat, right out of the gate. I have an apple right here and a knife. And this is, of course, something you can try at home, but be careful. Make sure you get some supervision from a grown-up because, there's a knife involved. So I'm going to cut this apple in half very carefully. This is not a very sharp knife, but it does the job eventually. There we go. So, one half of the apple I'm going to leave out in the open. One half of the apple I'm going to wrap in plastic wrap, and I'm going to see what happens to each one of the apple halves. So the one with the stem is going to stay with us. The one without the stem is going to stay wrapped up. So those will be sitting here just on the corner. Not going to touch them throughout the whole stream. The reason I'm doing this, the reason I'm doing this is it's a demonstration of oxidation. Now, oxidation, the word makes it seem like it's oxygen interacting with something, reacting, and making an oxide, which makes sense. But oxidation simply refers to an atom losing an electron. So everything is made of atoms, everything's made of molecules, and inside those molecules are atoms. Inside those atoms are electrons. And when atoms interact with each other, some atoms have more electrons, some atoms have fewer electrons, and they will move those electrons around. If an atom loses an electron, that's usually oxidation. And if it gains an electron, that's usually reduction. I'm not going to talk about reduction, but they go hand in hand, because if something's losing an electron, something else is going to want that electron. It's going to go yoink. It's going to take that electron, grab onto it. Some things oxidize more easily than others, and some things don't oxidize very easily. So one really easy example that we see all the time is rust. Iron oxidizes really easily. Copper oxidizes really easily, and when iron oxidizes, it changes into rust, and copper changes into sort of a greenish, flaky sort of form of rust. They oxidize in similar ways, but they change color. They change their properties. Whenever something oxidizes, it changes how it behaves because it lost that electron, and so it's reacting differently with the world around it. So metals oxidize really easily. Aluminum doesn't oxidize very easily as other things. It still oxidizes. I have something here that oxidizes very easily, and so I have to keep it in this special container here. This, well, I'll keep it in the little package. This, first I'll rotate it. This is another metal. It's kind of a rare metal. Get in there. There we go. This is yttrium. So that metal coin is about the size of a penny. That is made of 99% pure yttrium. Yeah, 99. It's about 2 grams of yttrium. And it's a little tricky to see because of the glare, but it's a normal looking metal. But it is in that case because if it got in contact with oxygen, it would oxidize very easily and it would rust. Oh, and Isaac said, yeah, the Statue of Liberty used to be brown copper and now it's green. That's exactly right. Because the Statue of Liberty has copper in the metal that makes up the skin of the statue, the air, the oxygen in the air, the pollution in the area around it made it react, oxidize, and turn green. Oh, Shaggy Hippo 86, welcome. So that's one example of something that reacts very easily. Coin of yttrium, part of my personal collection. I should put it back in the bag. Now, some things don't oxidize as easily. For instance, plastic. Yeah, plastic doesn't oxidize very easily. Unlike metals, metals have really simple molecules, really simple atoms. They're really going to easily give up electrons. Plastics, very complicated molecules. The atoms are all tied up. They don't want to give up electrons, so it's harder for plastic to oxidize. Of course, I had to bring this in as an example of plastic, because why wouldn't I? Now, let's take a look at our apple. It's only been about 10 minutes or so, so there hasn't been much change at all, really. But we'll have to let that sit a little longer. And what will happen eventually, does anyone know what happens to an apple when you leave it sitting out like this? So far, nothing has happened to my apple, but I've only been leaving it sit for about 10 minutes or so. What happens to an apple when it sits out, just out in the open in the air like this? There's a little bit of it happening, but not enough to write home about. Kind of looks like it's happening faster inside the plastic wrap, but I'll have to look at that later. It turns brown, yeah. Mom Engineering the Future, Isaac, they're both correct. It turns brown. That browning, that change of color, is the apple oxidizing? What happens is there's enzymes, things called enzymes, ENZYMES, enzymes. Those are inside the fruit of the apple, and when it's coming in contact with oxygen in the air, those enzymes will react and oxidize, and they actually produce melanin, and that's why it turns brown. So the longer I leave this sit, the browner it'll get. A slightly brown apple is still edible, but yeah, if it rots or gets soggy, rotting is part oxidation and part microbes like bacteria interacting with it and doing their thing. So you don't want to eat a rotten apple. That would be terrible. But if it's slightly brown, that's just because those enzymes that I mentioned oxidized. What I'm noticing is when I first cut it, it was really shiny. Now it's not quite as shiny. It wouldn't show up very well on this camera, but this is something you can try at home, and that's actually your challenge. Here's your challenge for today. You can explore how things oxidize. There's a couple experiments you can do. One is the experiment I did here. It'll take a little longer. You can actually see, experiment with how things oxidize. So cut the apple in half, put one in plastic wrap, or even submerge it in oil, in vegetable oil, and then leave one out in the open, see what happens. You can kind of see a little bit of brown right there at the center of the one that's in the plastic wrap. You can see a little bit of brown there starting to form. So see how that changes. And something else you can try is experiment with different things made of metal and different materials and how they react with water or something like that. Water will make oxidation go faster. Oh, as a materials engineer, I used to study oxidation on automobile components. You definitely don't want your automobile's frames to fall off your car. Yeah, studying oxidation is super important in other industries too. One of the things that people run into, some things make oxidation go faster. So water will make iron and other metals rust faster. Salt will do the same thing. So in the winter, all the salt that goes on the road, it can cause some problems because that gets mixed in with the water, and it can make cars rust a lot faster. So sometimes we run into problems like that, and it definitely helps making sure that those materials are ready for the conditions. One final little tidbit, and then I'll bid you farewell. At the Science Center, we have the steamship William G. Mather, and it's a freighter. It's made of steel. It's designed to go in the water, but the things it carried were iron ore, coal, sometimes grain. Freighters like it could carry salt, but those freighters had to be specially designed because that salt would make the ship rust faster. So our ship, the steamship William J. Mather, would not be able to carry salt because it wasn't designed for it, and it wouldn't be able to go in the ocean because it wasn't designed for it. The ones that go in the ocean have to be treated a certain way to make sure that they don't oxidize super quickly. So thank you very much for joining me on today's episode of Oxidation Reactions for Curiosity Corner Live. Share those experiments that you experiment with on social media with the hashtag StayCuriousCLE. I can't wait to see what kinds of experiments you do and what things you find. So thank you very much for joining me. I keep looking at this apple. I probably will eat it after the stream. And that's it from me. My name's Andy. Bow ties are cool. stay curious.